That Thanksgiving night, I knelt on the kitchen floor, the taste of burnt pumpkin pie choking me while my stepmother's handprint burned on my cheek. Beside the counter, my grandmother sat motionless, watching the violence in total silence. I thought she had chosen their side, but the moment I locked eyes with her, the family dinner ended, and the trial for every year I was used began. They did not know the silent witness was keeping score. My name is Rachel Pierce, and I am 32 years old. I repeated this fact to myself like a mantra, gripping the steering wheel of my sedan until my knuckles turned white. Outside, the gray Oregon sky was doing exactly what it always did in November, dumping sheets of freezing rain onto the asphalt of Interstate 5. I was a content manager at Northwind Collective, a digital marketing firm where I managed 6 people and budgets that ran into the thousands of dollars. I paid a mortgage on a condo in the city. I had a 401k. I was an adult. Yet, as every mile marker passed, bringing me closer to the suburban driveway of my childhood home, I felt that adult identity stripping away like old paint. In the passenger seat, strapped in with the seatbelt as if it were a fragile passenger, sat a pumpkin pie. It was not just a dessert. To me, it was a shield. It was my contribution. It was the physical proof that I was coming to this Thanksgiving dinner as a guest, as an equal, and not as the unpaid help I had been for the last 15 years. I turned off the highway and navigated the winding roads leading into the quiet, affluent neighborhood where my father, Thomas, lived with his wife, Diane. The house loomed ahead, a picture-perfect 2-story colonial with a manicured lawn that defied the muddy season. Warm, golden light spilled from the windows, casting long shadows on the wet driveway. From the outside, it looked like a Norman Rockwell painting come to life. It looked like the American dream. But I knew the air inside would be thin, tight, and suffocating. I parked the car and took a deep breath. The air smelled of wet pine needles and wood smoke. I reached over and unbuckled the pie. I had spent 4 hours on it yesterday. It was not the store-bought sugary sludge Diane usually served. This was a maple pumpkin pie with a toasted walnut crust, a recipe I had found in a high-end culinary magazine and perfected over 3 trial runs. It was sophisticated. It was healthy. It was me saying I have my own life, my own tastes, and my own value. I walked up the path, the rain misting against my face, and before I could even knock, the door swung open. The wall of heat and noise hit me instantly. "Rachel, you made it!" My father, Thomas, stood there, holding a glass of red wine. He looked older, his hair thinning, but he had that same passive, non-confrontational smile that had defined my entire adolescence. He hugged me, a quick, one-armed embrace that felt more like a formality than a greeting. "Hi, Dad," I said, stepping inside and shaking the rain off my coat. "Happy Thanksgiving." Behind him, the house was alive. My half-brother, Evan, was laughing at something on the television in the living room, while his wife, Brooke, chased their 2 children, a 4-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl, around the sofa. The kids were screaming with delight, high on sugar and holiday excitement. They were cute kids, objectively speaking. They were not evil. They were just loud, demanding, and accustomed to being the center of the universe. And then there was Diane. My stepmother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a pristine white apron. She was a woman who waged war against aging with aggressive determination. Her hair dyed a blonde so bright it looked sharp, her makeup flawless. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence," Diane said. Her tone was light, airy, but the underlying edge was sharp enough to cut glass. "We were worried you would be too busy with your big city job to make time for family." "I told you I would be here by 4, I said, keeping my voice steady. I held up the pie box. "I brought dessert." Diane's eyes flicked to the box, then back to my face. "Oh, lovely. We have plenty, but I suppose one more won't hurt." She turned and marched back into the kitchen. I followed, my stomach tightening. This was the battlefield. The kitchen was expansive, with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances that cost more than my first car. The air was thick with the scent of roasting turkey, sage stuffing, and caramelized onions. But my eyes went immediately to the figure sitting at the small breakfast table in the corner, just outside the main cooking zone. Grandma Eleanor. My father's mother sat like a statue amidst the culinary chaos. She was 81 years old, a woman carved from granite and old-world stoicism. She wore a dark navy dress, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her hands, gnarled with arthritis, but still strong, rested on the handle of her cane. She was not helping. She was not cooking. She was watching. Eleanor Pierce did not speak much. She never had. She was a woman of observation, a matriarch who hoarded secrets and dispensed judgment with a single raised eyebrow. When I was a child, I used to think she was scary. As I grew older, I thought she was just cold. But tonight, she looked different. There was a sharpness in her gaze, a focus that felt unsettling. "Hi, Grandma," I said, walking over to kiss her cheek. Her skin felt like dry parchment paper. She smelled of lavender and old books. She looked at me, her pale blue eyes assessing my outfit, my hair, and finally, the box in my hands. "Rachel," she said. Her voice was raspy, low. "You look tired." "I'm fine, Grandma. Just work," I lied. "Work is good," she murmured, turning her gaze back to Diane, who was aggressively mashing potatoes as if they had personally offended her. "Better than idleness." I moved to the counter to set down my pie. I wanted to be helpful, but on my own terms. I wanted to be a sous chef, not a servant. "Do you need help with the glazing, Diane?" I asked. "No," Diane said instantly. "Brooke is setting the table. Why don't you go check on the kids? I think little Leo needs his nose wiped, and they are getting rowdy." The trap. It was sprung so casually. Go check the kids. Go be the nanny. Go disappear so the adults can talk. "Brooke is right there," I said, pointing toward the living room with a forced smile. "I'm sure she has it handled. I'd love to show you the pie I made. It is a new recipe." Diane stopped mashing. The silence in the kitchen stretched thin, vibrating with tension. She turned slowly, the potato masher still in her hand. "A new recipe?" she repeated. "Rachel, you know we always have the traditional pumpkin pie, the one with the condensed milk, the one your father likes." "I know," I said, opening the box to reveal my creation. It was beautiful. The crust was golden brown, studded with crushed walnuts. The filling was a deep, rich amber, not the neon orange of the canned variety. But I thought we could try something a little healthier. I used maple syrup instead of corn syrup, and a walnut crust instead of white flour. Diane stared at the pie as if I had just placed a severed head on her granite counter. "Walnuts?" she said, her voice rising an octave. "You put nuts in the crust? Evan is sensitive to textures. You know that." "Evan is 34 years old," I said, my patience fraying. "He eats almonds by the handful. He will be fine." "It is not traditional," Diane snapped. "It is Thanksgiving. People want comfort. They want what they know. They do not want your diet food experiments." "It is not diet food, Diane. It is real food. It is delicious." "It is selfish," she hissed. The word hung in the air. The sounds of the football game and the children screaming in the living room seemed to fade away, leaving only the hum of the refrigerator and the shallow breathing of the three women in the kitchen. Grandma Eleanor shifted in her chair. The wood creaked. Her eyes darted from Diane to me, then to the pie. She said nothing. "Selfish?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "I spent 4 hours baking this. I drove 2 hours to get here. I took time off work." "You did it to show off," Diane said, stepping closer. Her face was flushed from the heat of the oven and her own rising temper. "You always do this. You come in here with your fancy city attitude, trying to prove you are better than us, better than my cooking. You think we are just simple suburban people who eat trash. Is that it?" "I never said that," I argued, stepping back as she encroached on my space. I just wanted to contribute something I made. You wanted to ruin the menu, Diane countered. She reached out and poked the crust of my pie with a manicured finger. Look at this. It is hard. It is burnt. It is toasted, I defended. It is supposed to be crunchy. It is garbage, Diane declared. Before I could react, she grabbed the edge of the pie box. It happened in slow motion, yet too fast to stop. She shoved the box. It slid across the smooth granite. It tipped over the edge. I gasped, lunging for it, but I was too late. The pie hit the tiled floor with a sickening, wet thud. The beautiful walnut crust shattered. The amber filling splattered across the white tiles, smearing onto the bottom of the cabinets. My 4 hours of labor, my shield, my pride, lay in a ruined heap at my feet. Oops, Diane said. There was zero regret in her voice. Well, that solves that problem. Now we do not have to force anyone to eat it. I stood there, frozen, staring at the mess. Heat rushed to my face, a mix of humiliation and pure, unadulterated rage. My hands shook. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table. But the conditioning of 20 years kicked in. The instinct to de-escalate, to clean up, to be the good girl. Slowly, I knelt. I grabbed a handful of paper towels from the holder. My knees hit the hard ceramic floor. I began to scoop up the ruined filling, the smell of maple and roasted pumpkin now cloying and nauseating. You are so clumsy, Diane muttered above me. Look at this mess you made in my kitchen, on Thanksgiving. You pushed it, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I looked up at her from the floor. You pushed it on purpose. Diane's face twisted. The mask of the polite suburban housewife dropped completely. Do not you dare accuse me, she spat. You left it hanging off the edge. You are always so careless, just like your mother was. The mention of my mother, my real mother, who had died when I was 15, snapped something inside me. I stood up. I was still holding the paper towels, dripping with pumpkin goop. Do not talk about her, I said. My voice was louder now. You do not get to talk about her. I will talk about whatever I want in my house, Diane shouted. She stepped forward, invading my personal space again. You ungrateful little brat, after everything I have done for you, I took you in. I raised you. You used me, I yelled back. You used me as a nanny for 10 years. That was the trigger. The truth was the one thing Diane could not tolerate. Her hand moved. It was a blur of motion. Crack. The sound was sharp, like a dry branch snapping. Her open palm connected with the side of my face. The force of it caught me completely off guard. My head snapped to the right. I lost my balance on the slick floor where the pie filling had splattered. I crashed down. My hip hit the hard tile. My shoulder slammed into the cabinet door. The pain was immediate. A stinging fire on my cheek. A dull throb in my hip. I lay there for a second, stunned. The kitchen was silent. The shouting in the living room had not stopped. The television was still blaring. No one out there had heard. No one knew. It was just us. My ears were ringing. I could taste blood inside my lip where my teeth had cut it. I could smell the burnt sugar of the pie on the floor next to my face. Diane stood over me, her chest heaving. She looked shocked for a split second, looking at her own hand, but then her expression hardened into defensive malice. Look what you made me do, she whispered fiercely. You just push and push until people break. I pushed myself up onto one elbow. My hand slipped in the pumpkin filling. I felt small. I felt like the 15-year-old girl who used to cry in her pillow because she was too tired to do homework after putting toddlers to bed. I lifted my head. My eyes found the breakfast table. Grandma Eleanor was still there. She had not moved. Her hands were gripping the armrests of her wooden chair so tightly that her knuckles were yellow. She was looking right at me. Our eyes locked. She had seen it. She had seen Diane push the pie. She had heard the insults. She had seen the slap. She had seen me fall. I waited. In that suspended second, time stretched out. I waited for her to stand up. I waited for her to bang her cane on the floor. I waited for her to shout, to defend her blood, to protect the granddaughter she had knit sweaters for. But she did nothing. Her face remained a mask of stone. She looked at me, trembling on the floor with pie on my shirt and a red mark blooming on my face, and then, slowly, deliberately, she turned her head away. She looked out the window at the rain falling in the dark. The betrayal hit me harder than Diane's hand ever could. It punched the air out of my lungs. My grandmother, the matriarch, the witness, had chosen silence. She had chosen peace over truth. She had chosen to let me be the sacrifice on the altar of this family's dysfunction. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and angry, not tears of sadness, but tears of realization. I was alone. I had always been alone in this house. Diane turned her back on me, walking to the sink to wash her hands as if she had just handled raw meat. "Clean this up, Rachel," she said over the sound of running water. "And fix your face before dinner. I do not want you ruining the mood for the children." I stayed on the floor for another moment, the cold seeping into my jeans. I looked at the back of Grandma Eleanor's head. She did not turn back to look at me. The pain in my cheek was throbbing, a rhythmic pulse matching my heartbeat, but the pain in my chest was colder, heavier. It was the weight of a bridge burning, collapsing into the river below. I wiped the pumpkin from my hand onto my jeans. I took a breath that shuddered in my chest. They thought this was just another tantrum. They thought I would clean up the mess, put on some concealer, and sit at the table to smile and pass the cranberry sauce. They thought I was still the girl who begged for scraps of affection. They were wrong. The Rachel who walked into this house 10 minutes ago was gone. She died the moment her grandmother looked away. The woman rising from the floor now was someone else entirely, and she was done cleaning up their messes. As I lay on the cold tiles, the throbbing in my cheek was new, a sharp, stinging reality that I could not ignore, but the feeling of being small, of being beneath them, of being the debris that someone else had to step over. That was old. That was ancient. It was a sensation that had been my constant companion for 17 years, ever since my mother died, and the dynamic of this house shifted under my feet like loose tectonic plates. It started when I was 15 years old. My mother had been gone for 11 months when my father brought Diane home. He sat me down on the beige sofa in the living room, holding Diane's hand, his eyes wet with a mixture of grief and desperate hope. He told me that we were going to be a family again. He told me that the empty spaces in the house would be filled with life. I wanted to believe him. I was a teenager drowning in silence, missing the sound of a woman's voice in the hallways. I wanted a mother. What I got was a manager. The transition was subtle at first, a slow erosion of my status from daughter to utility. It began with small requests. Diane would ask if I could watch Evan, my half-brother, who was then just a toddler, while she ran to the grocery store, just for 30 minutes. Then it became an hour. Then it became entire afternoons because she had a hair appointment, or a lunch with friends, or simply a headache that required her to lie in a darkened room while I played blocks on the carpet. "You are so good with him, Rachel," she would say, her voice dripping with that saccharine sweetness that I eventually learned was a coating for poison. "He loves you so much more than the babysitters. You are family." Family. That was the word they used to pick the lock of my boundaries. By the time I was 18 and preparing for college, the pattern was set in stone. Every holiday followed a script that never varied. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, 4th of July. It did not matter what the calendar said. For everyone else, these dates meant relaxation. For me, they meant labor. I remembered one Christmas specifically. I was 22. Home from my last year of university. The house was full of guests. Diane's friends, my father's business partners, neighbors from down the street. The living room was a sea of velvet dresses and cashmere sweaters, the air thick with the smell of pine and expensive scotch. Laughter roared from the dining room where the adults were gathered around a charcuterie board that looked like a work of art. I was not in the dining room. I was in the finished basement, surrounded by a chaotic ocean of torn wrapping paper, discarded Lego bricks, and 5 screaming children under the age of 7. Evan's children were there, along with the offspring of Diane's best friends. They were not bad kids. I needed to be clear about that. They were not evil. They did not hit me or bite me, but they were loud. They were spoiled, and they had been fed sugar for 3 hours straight. One of them had spilled grape juice on the carpet, and I was on my hands and knees scrubbing it with club soda, while another one cried because he wanted to watch a specific cartoon that we did not have. Upstairs, I could hear the clinking of glasses. I could hear my father making a toast. To family, he would be saying, to the blessings of being together. I sat back on my heels, the smell of grape juice and damp carpet filling my nose, and I wondered if anyone upstairs had even noticed I was gone. Had my father looked at the empty chair and asked, "Where is Rachel?" Or had Diane simply waved a manicured hand and said, "Oh, she loves playing with the little ones. She insisted on going downstairs." They never asked me if I wanted to be there. It was just assumed. The logic was circular and suffocating. I was single. Therefore I had no life. I had no husband. Therefore I had no status. I had no children of my own. Therefore my purpose was to care for theirs. "You are young. You have plenty of energy," Diane would say when I tried to protest, to say that I wanted to join the adults for a cocktail. "Besides, you need the practice. When you have your own someday, you will thank me for all this experience." It was a brilliant trap. If I complained, I was selfish. If I refused, I was ungrateful. If I asked to be included, I was difficult. I remembered the compliments that were really shackles. "Rachel is the only one who can get Leo to sleep," Brooke would say, handing me her screaming infant while she reached for a glass of Chardonnay. "I do not know what we would do without you. Rachel, you are a lifesaver." They called me a lifesaver, but they treated me like life support, essential machinery that you did not have to speak to, only maintain minimally so it kept working. The worst memory, the one that still made my stomach turn with acid when I thought about it, happened 4 years ago. It was not a holiday, it was a Tuesday. I had just started my job at Northwind Collective. I was a junior associate then, fighting tooth and nail to prove myself in a cutthroat industry. There was a gala, a massive networking event downtown where the CEO was going to be. My mentor had told me specifically that I needed to be there. "This is where careers are made. Rachel," she had told me, "show up, look sharp, shake hands." I had bought a new dress. I had spent $150 on getting my hair done. I was standing in my apartment, putting on my earrings, feeling a flutter of excitement that I rarely felt. I was going to be a professional. I was going to be Rachel Pierce, marketing strategist, not Rachel Pierce, the convenient nanny. Then the phone rang. It was Diane. "Rachel, you need to come over, now." Her voice was frantic. "I cannot," I said, checking my watch. "I have a work event in 45 minutes. It is important." "Brooke's nanny canceled," Diane said, bulldozing right over my words. "Evan and Brooke have tickets to the symphony. They have been planning this for months, and your father and I are hosting the bridge club tonight. There is no one to watch the kids." "Diane, I really cannot," I pleaded. "This is for my career. My boss expects me to be there." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a heavy, judgmental silence. "Well," Diane said, her voice dropping to a disappointed whisper, "I suppose that is your choice. I just thought that family meant something to you. I told Evan you would help because you are his sister. But if a party is more important than helping your brother when he is in a bind, then fine. I will just tell them you were too busy climbing the corporate ladder to care." The guilt was immediate and crushing. It was a reflex they had installed in me, a button they could press whenever they wanted. I took off the expensive dress. I washed the hairspray out of my hair. I drove to the suburbs, and I sat on the couch watching Paw Patrol reruns, while Evan and Brooke went to the symphony and my father played cards in the next room. I missed the gala. The next day, my mentor asked me where I was. When I told her I had to babysit for family, the look in her eyes was not sympathy, it was pity. It was a realization that I was not serious. It took me 2 years to claw back the professional respect I lost that night. And my father? Thomas Pierce always stood on the sidelines of these transactions. He never gave the orders. He never handed me the baby wipes or pointed me toward the playroom, but he watched it happen. "Your mother is just stressed," he would tell me privately, using the title Mother for Diane, even though he knew it made me flinch. "She tries so hard to make everything perfect for everyone. Just help her out. Sweetheart, do it for me. Keep the peace." He weaponized his own passivity. He made me feel that by setting a boundary with Diane, I was hurting him. I could not hate him, because he was gentle. He was soft-spoken. But over the years, I realized that his softness was a form of cowardice. He let his daughter be cannibalized by his wife's demands because it was easier than having an argument. He sacrificed me to keep his life comfortable. And Grandma Eleanor? Lying on the floor with my cheek burning, I thought about the woman sitting 5 feet away from me. For years, I had convinced myself she was my silent ally. When I was 20, struggling to pay for textbooks, she had pressed a folded $50 bill into my hand while Diane wasn't looking. "For coffee," she had whispered, winking. When I would leave these family gatherings, exhausted and smelling of baby formula, she would sometimes sneak a container of leftovers into my bag, the good stuff. The roast beef, not the salad. She would pat my hand and say, "You are a good girl, Rachel. You have a good heart." I survived on those crumbs of affection. I told myself that she saw me. I told myself that her secret kindnesses were proof that she knew what was happening and disapproved of it. But she never spoke up, not once. She never said, "Diane, let the girl eat dinner with us." She never said, "Thomas, why is your daughter cleaning the kitchen while everyone else watches football?" She never said, "Evan, watch your own damn children." She bought my silence with $50 bills and Tupperware. She paid me off so she could feel better about watching me be exploited. She was the Switzerland of our family war, neutral, observant, and ultimately complicit. I had spent my entire 20s and early 30s trying to build a life that was separate from them. I moved out. I rented a studio apartment that smelled like damp plaster, but was mine. I upgraded to a condo with a view of the river. I got promoted. I managed budgets. I fired incompetent employees. I was a formidable woman in every other aspect of my life. But the moment I crossed the threshold of this house, I reverted. I shrank. I became the 15-year-old orphan desperate for approval. I allowed them to hand me the apron. I allowed them to sit me at the kids' table. I allowed them to erase me. I realized, staring at the grout lines on the floor, that I had never actually said the word no, not with conviction, not with consequences. I had complained, I had bargained, I had sighed, but I had never drawn a line in the sand and said, "Do not cross this." I had believed that if I was good enough, if I was helpful enough, if I served them enough, eventually they would look at me and say, "Thank you, Rachel. We love you. Come sit with us." I was waiting for a reward that was never coming. I was working for a paycheck that they had no intention of signing. To them, I was not a person with needs or feelings. I was an appliance. You do not thank your toaster for making toast. You do not invite your vacuum cleaner to the dinner table. And when the appliance malfunctions, when it tries to make a walnut pie instead of the standard version, when it tries to assert an identity, you kick it, you punish it. Diane's slap was not an accident. It was a corrective measure. It was the master disciplining the servant for stepping out of line. The pain in my cheek began to subside, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. It was a feeling like ice water running through my veins. This was it. This was the bottom. If I stood up and cleaned this mess, if I wiped my face and sat at the dinner table, if I let this slide like I had let 1,000 other indignities slide, this would be my life forever. I would be 50 years old, washing dishes while Evan's grandchildren ran around my legs. I would be the spinster aunt, the help, the doormat. I looked at the ruined pie. The walnut crust was shattered, the filling oozing across the floor. It was a metaphor so perfect it was almost funny. I had tried to give them something of substance, something real, something healthy, and they had thrown it on the ground because they preferred the cheap, sugary fake stuff they were used to. I was done being the healthy option they rejected. I was done being the walnut crust in a world that wanted canned pumpkin sludge. I pushed myself up to my knees. My joints popped. The silence in the kitchen was still absolute, save for the distant roar of the football game. I looked at my hands. They were sticky with maple syrup and shame. But underneath the dirt, they were steady. For the first time in 15 years, my hands were not shaking with the effort of holding back tears. They were steady with the resolve of a woman who had finally decided to stop waiting for permission to exist. I had spent years trying to figure out how to fit into this family. Now, I realized the only way to survive was to break it, or at least, to break the part of it that held me prisoner. The trial was over, the verdict was in, and the sentence I had been serving for 15 years was about to end. Right now, tonight, I just had to stand up. 2 weeks before the incident that would shatter my family. The phone rang on my desk at Northwind Collective. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and the gray Oregon rain was already streaking the windows of our 4th-floor office. I looked down at the screen. The name flashing there made my stomach tighten into a knot. Diane. I debated letting it go to voicemail. In fact, my thumb hovered over the decline button for 3 full seconds. I had plans. I had a life. I had a job where people respected me. But the conditioning of a lifetime is a heavy chain to break. So I picked up. "Hello, Diane," I said, keeping my voice professional, the same tone I used with difficult clients who wanted to pay in exposure rather than money. "Rachel, darling." Her voice was a confectionery overload, sweet and airy, lacking the sharp edges I was used to. "I hope I'm not interrupting your important work. I know how busy you are." The flattery was the first red flag. Diane usually spoke to me as if my career were a cute hobby I did between service intervals for the family. "I have a few minutes," I said. "Is everything okay? Is Dad okay?" "Oh, Thomas is fine. Everyone is wonderful. I was just calling because we are finalizing the plans for Thanksgiving, and we realized we have not heard from you yet. We are just assuming you are coming, of course, but I wanted to confirm so I can order the right-sized turkey." I took a deep breath. I had rehearsed this. For the first time in years, I had an alternative. My friend Sarah and her husband had rented a cabin near Mount Hood. They had invited me. No kids, no drama, just wine, hiking, and people who actually asked me how my day was. "Actually, Diane, I was thinking of doing something different this year," I said. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Sarah invited me up to the mountains. I think I might go with them." There was a silence on the other end of the line. It was not an empty silence. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room. "Oh," Diane said. The sweetness had evaporated, replaced by a wounded, fragile tone that was far more dangerous. "I see. Well, that is nice. For you." "It is just a weekend trip," I added defensively. No, I understand." She sighed, a sound that carried the weight of 1,000 disappointments. "It is just that your father was so looking forward to having everyone together. He has been talking about it for weeks. 'Finally,' he said, 'my whole family under one roof. But if you prefer to be with your friends, I will explain it to him. I am sure he will understand why strangers are more important than his own flesh and blood.'" "I did not say that," I said, my grip on the phone tightening. "And of course," she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "there is your grandmother. You know Eleanor is not getting any younger. Rachel, her health has been so fragile this winter. The doctor says her heart is... Well, we do not want to alarm anyone, but we honestly do not know how many Thanksgivings she has left. I just thought you would want to be there, for her." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. It was precise. It was calculated. She knew exactly where the armor was weak. She knew I could ignore her, and I could even ignore my father. But I could not ignore the idea of Grandma Eleanor looking at an empty chair and wondering why I did not care enough to come. "I will think about it," I said weakly. "You do that, sweetie," Diane said, her voice brightening instantly. "Oh, and do not worry about the kids this year. I know in the past it has been a bit chaotic, but they are older now. Evan and Brooke are very hands-on parents. We just want you to come and relax. Just a nice family dinner, like a guest." Like a guest. The words sounded like a fairy tale. 2 hours later, my father called. If Diane was the bad cop, Thomas Pierce was the weary, gentle cop who made you confess just to make him feel better. "Diane told me you might not make it," he said. He sounded crushed. "I get it. Honey, you have your own life. I do not want to hold you back." "It is not that, Dad," I said, pacing my small living room. "It is just, every year, I end up working. I end up watching Evan's kids while you guys drink wine. I am 32 years old. I do not want to be the babysitter anymore." "I know," he said softly. "I know. And I'm sorry about that. I promise you, Rachel, this year will be different. I have spoken to Evan. I have spoken to Diane. You are coming as my daughter, not as help. Just come for dinner, one evening. That is all I ask. Do it for me? Do it to make your old dad happy?" I stopped pacing. I looked out the window at the city lights of Portland. I wanted to be strong. I wanted to say no. But the pull of that childhood desire, the desperate need to be accepted by him, was too strong. "Okay," I said, "but I have conditions." "Name them," he said instantly. "I am coming for dinner only," I said firmly. "I will arrive at 4. I am leaving by 8 o'clock. I am not staying overnight. I am driving back to the city that same night because I am meeting Sarah early the next morning for the rest of the weekend, and I am not watching the kids, not even for 5 minutes." "Done," my father said. 8 o'clock departure. No babysitting. I promise. Rachel, it is just dinner." "Okay," I said. "I will be there." I hung up feeling a mixture of relief and dread. I had set a boundary. They had agreed to it. It felt like progress. But the unease lingered. A few days later, I was scrolling through social media on my lunch break when a post from Brooke popped up on my feed. It was a picture of a pile of suitcases and winter gear. Snowsuits, boots, thick parkas. The caption read, "So excited for our family getaway. Cabin life starts Friday morning. Cannot wait for the snow." I froze. Friday morning was the day after Thanksgiving. They were going to a cabin. My father, Diane, Evan, Brooke, and the kids. Nobody had mentioned a cabin to me. I sat there, staring at the screen, putting the pieces together. If I had agreed to stay the night, or if I had not been so firm about leaving at 8 o'clock, where would I be on Friday morning? I would be in the car with them. I would be going to this cabin. And why would they invite me to a cabin without telling me? Because in a cabin, with no Wi-Fi and nowhere to go, who watches the kids while the adults ski or drink hot cocoa by the fire? The realization made my blood run cold. They had not invited me to the vacation because they wanted me there. They had assumed I would just be there, absorbed into the infrastructure of their plans like luggage. By setting a hard departure time, I had inadvertently ruined a plan I was not even supposed to know about. It stung. It stung that they were planning a family vacation that effectively excluded me unless I was useful. But it also validated my decision. I was right to protect myself. Then came the call from Grandma Eleanor. It was 3 days before Thanksgiving. I was in my kitchen, testing the crust for the pie I planned to bring. My phone buzzed, and when I saw Grandma landline on the screen, I wiped the flour from my hands instantly. Eleanor never called. She hated phones. She said they made people sound like ghosts. "Grandma?" I answered. "Is everything okay?" "Rachel." Her voice came through the line, crackling with static. It sounded thin, like dry leaves skittering on pavement. "Diane tells me you are coming on Thursday." "Yes, Grandma, I am. I want to see you." There was a long pause. I could hear the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in her hallway through the receiver. "Are you sure?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean? Do you not want me to come?" "That is not what I said," she replied, her voice dropping lower. "I just asked if you are sure. It is a long drive. The weather is bad. You have friends you could be with. Grandma, are you trying to tell me something? I asked, pressing the phone harder against my ear. Is something going on? I am just an old woman, she said, reverting to her usual cryptic deflection. I just want you to be happy. Rachel, sometimes, happiness is knowing where you do not belong. I want to see you, I repeated, feeling a sudden surge of stubbornness. I am coming for you. I do not care about the rest of them. I am bringing a pie, a special one. She was silent for another moment, then she sighed, a sound that sounded almost like resignation. All right, child. If you must, drive safe. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. Her words swirled in my head. Happiness is knowing where you do not belong. Was she warning me? Was she trying to save me? Or was she, like everyone else, just implying that I was an outsider who should stop trying to force my way in? I did not know, but the confusion only hardened my resolve. I was going to walk into that house, head held high, eat my turkey, kiss my grandmother, and leave at 8 o'clock sharp. I would treat it like a business transaction. The night before Thanksgiving, I stood in my kitchen, preparing the pie. For years, I had made the pie Diane wanted. The recipe was on a stained index card in her handwriting. 2 cans of pumpkin puree, 1 can of sweetened condensed milk, white sugar, cinnamon, and a store-bought frozen crust. It was sweet, mushy, and exactly what they expected. Tonight, I threw that index card in the trash. I took out fresh sugar pumpkins I had roasted myself. I lined up the bottle of grade A maple syrup, the bag of raw walnuts, the fresh ginger and nutmeg. This pie was not just dessert. It was a statement. It was a rejection of the cloying, artificial sweetness they demanded from me. I was making something complex, something with texture, something with a bit of bite to it. I rolled out the dough, pressing the crushed walnuts into the flour. My movements were sharp, precise. I am not the nanny, I whispered to the empty room as I crimped the edges of the crust. I am not the help. I am Rachel Pierce. I am 32 years old, and I am baking the pie I want to eat. I placed it in the oven and watched through the glass as it began to rise. It looked different. It looked darker, rougher, more substantial. They probably would hate it. I knew that. Diane would turn up her nose. Evan would ask where the whipped cream was, but that did not matter. For the first time, I was not bringing an offering to appease them. I was bringing a piece of myself. I packed my bag for the next day. I put my car keys on the counter next to the cooling pie. I checked my itinerary. Arrive at 4, leave at 8. I felt prepared. I felt like a soldier polishing her rifle before a battle. I thought I had accounted for every variable. I thought I had sealed every exit and reinforced every wall. I did not know that the enemy was not planning a battle. They were planning an ambush. And I did not know that the person I was doing this all for, my grandmother, was sitting in her room miles away, preparing for a war I did not even know was being waged. I went to sleep dreaming of the mountains, oblivious to the fact that I would never make it there. The pie sat on the counter, smelling of maple and defiance, waiting for the morning that would change everything. The moment I stepped across the threshold at 4 o'clock sharp, the air in the house felt heavy, like the pressure drop before a thunderstorm. I had my conditions clearly mapped out in my head. Arrival at 4, departure at 8, no babysitting, just a guest. But a boundary is only as strong as your willingness to defend it, and my family was expert at siege warfare. I had barely taken off my coat, shielding the pie box from the damp air. When Diane swooped in, she was wearing a beige cashmere sweater that looked soft, but likely cost more than my monthly car payment. Her smile was tight, plastered on like a decal. "Rachel, you are here," she exclaimed, not hugging me but gesturing vaguely toward the living room. "Perfect timing. Listen, I am in the weeds with the gravy, and the turkey is browning too fast. Could you just watch the little ones for 10 minutes? Just while I get everything plated? Evan and Brooke are upstairs changing the baby." I started to protest, my grip on the pie box tightening. "Diane, I just got here. I need to put this pie down. Just put it on the counter, she said, already turning her back. 10 minutes. Rachel, honestly, do you want the turkey to burn? Go on. She vanished into the kitchen. I stood there, the familiar weight of obligation settling on my shoulders. It was just 10 minutes. I told myself I could do 10 minutes. If I refused, I would be the villain before I even took off my boots. I walked into the living room. Evan's 2 children, Leo and Sophie, were building a tower out of plastic blocks. They looked up, screamed, "Auntie Rachel!" and immediately tackled my legs. They were sweet. They were innocent. I sat on the carpet with them, checking my watch. 10 minutes turned into 30. Evan and Brooke finally came downstairs, smelling of fresh cologne and expensive perfume. Holding wine glasses they had apparently poured from a bottle in the dining room. "Oh, look at you," Brooke cooed, leaning against the doorframe. "You are such a natural. Rachel, I swear, they behave better for you than they do for us." "They are fine," I said, standing up and brushing dog hair off my black trousers. "But I think Diane needs help in the kitchen." "Actually," Brooke said, tilting her head, "Diane asked if you could set the table. You know how you do those fancy napkin folds? I tried, but mine look like crumpled tissues. You have that artistic eye." "Brooke, I am a guest tonight," I said, trying to keep my voice light. I know, she laughed, waving her hand dismissively. "But we are all pitching in. Come on, it will take you 5 minutes." It did not take 5 minutes. It took 20. I found myself alone in the dining room, laying out the heavy silverware, counting forks, folding linen napkins into intricate swans, because I knew if I just folded them into squares, Diane would redo them and sigh loudly the entire time. Through the doorway, I could see my father, Evan, and Brooke sitting on the plush sofas in the living room. My father was telling a story about his golf game. Evan was laughing. Brooke was scrolling on her phone. They were relaxing. They were guests. I was the staff. By the time we finally sat down to eat, my back was already aching. The table looked beautiful, a testament to my unpaid labor. The turkey sat in the center, golden and steaming. Grandma Eleanor was seated at the head of the table opposite my father, her presence quiet and imposing. She gave me a small, tight nod as I sat down in the chair nearest the kitchen door, the seat always reserved for the person who fetches things. "This looks wonderful, Diane," my father said, raising his glass. "To family." "To family," everyone echoed. I raised my water glass, my hand trembling slightly. The meal began, and with it, the Jack-in-the-Box routine. "Oh, shoot," Diane said, 2 bites in. "I forgot the cranberry sauce. It is in the fridge." She did not move. She just looked at me. I put down my fork. I stood up. I went to the kitchen. I brought the cranberry sauce. 5 minutes later, "Does anyone need more water?" Evan asked, holding up his empty glass. I put down my fork. I stood up. I filled the pitcher. I poured everyone water. 10 minutes later, "Rachel, honey," Brooke said. "Leo dropped his fork. Could you grab him a clean one?" I looked at Brooke. She was sitting closer to the kitchen than I was, but she was looking at me with that expectant, vacant smile. "I have not finished my stuffing yet," I said, gesturing to my full plate. "It is just a fork, Rachel," Diane said from the other end of the table. Her voice was sharp. "Do not be difficult. The child needs to eat." I stood up. I got the fork. By the time the main course was finished, my food was cold, and I had eaten perhaps 4 bites. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean of any dignity I had walked in with, but I told myself to hold on. Just dessert. Then I would leave. "Well," Diane announced, wiping her mouth, "who is ready for dessert? I know Rachel brought something unique." "I will get it," I said, standing up quickly. I wanted to handle my pie. I did not want her touching it. I went into the kitchen and retrieved the pie I had spent hours perfecting. I carried it out with 2 hands, placing it on a trivet in the center of the table. It smelled of toasted walnuts. dark maple syrup, and fresh ginger. It looked rustic and artisanal, a stark contrast to the perfect, manufactured glossy finish of the rest of the meal. "Wow," Evan said, leaning in. "That looks brown." "It is a maple walnut pumpkin pie," I explained, cutting a slice. "It has a nut crust, so it is gluten-free, and I used real maple syrup instead of corn syrup." Diane peered at it as if it were a biology experiment. "It smells very strong," she sniffed. "Is that clove? You know your father gets heartburn from too much spice." "It is ginger," I said. "It is good for digestion." "And the crust?" Diane continued, poking at the crumbly edge with her knife. "It looks burnt. Is it burnt?" "It is toasted walnuts," I said, my voice tightening. "It is supposed to be dark." "Well," Diane sighed, leaning back in her chair, "I suppose it is. Interesting. But we usually have the traditional pie, the one everyone likes. I just do not understand why you always have to change things. Rachel, why can you not just follow a simple tradition? Why does everything have to be a statement with you?" "It is not a statement," I said, feeling the heat rising in my cheeks. "It is just a pie. I wanted to make something nice for you, something healthy." "Healthy?" Evan scoffed, laughing. "It is Thanksgiving. Rachel, nobody wants healthy. We want sugar. We want coma food." He gestured to the pie with his fork. "Whatever. Cut me a slice. If it sucks, we can just throw it away and eat ice cream." The room went silent. "If it sucks, we can just throw it away." Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was the quiet, final sound of a cable parting under too much tension. "Excuse me?" I said. "I am just joking," Evan said, rolling his eyes. "God, you are so sensitive." "No," I said. I stood up, grabbing the pie plate. "No, you are not joking. You are rude." "Rachel," my father barked. "Sit down." "I am not sitting down," I said. I turned and walked into the kitchen, carrying the pie. I needed to breathe. I needed to get away from their faces. Diane followed me instantly. "Where do you think you are going?" she demanded, cornering me between the island and the stove. The kitchen was bright, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. The sounds of the dining room felt miles away. "I am leaving," I said, setting the pie down on the counter with a clatter. "I am taking my pie and I am leaving." "You are ruining this dinner," Diane hissed. Her face was flushed, her eyes narrow. "Your father has been looking forward to this for weeks, and you come in here with your attitude, refusing to help, making everyone uncomfortable with your weird food, and now you are throwing a tantrum?" "I did everything you asked," I shouted, my voice cracked. "I watched the kids. I set the table. I served the food. I did not eat a single hot bite of dinner. And you cannot even say thank you. You just criticize me." "Because you do it wrong," Diane shouted back. "You do everything with this air of superiority, like you are too good for us, too good for our food, too good to help your family." "I am not the help," I yelled. "I am your daughter. Well, I am Dad's daughter. I am not your maid." "You are an ungrateful, selfish girl," Diane spat. She reached out and grabbed the edge of the pie plate. "And this garbage?" She shoved it. She did not just nudge it. She shoved it with the full force of her frustration. The pie flew off the counter. It seemed to hang in the air for a second, a dark disk of wasted effort, before it smashed onto the tile floor. The ceramic plate shattered. The filling exploded, splattering my boots, the cabinets, the floor. I stared at it. "You?" I whispered. "You did that on purpose." I bent down, instinctively reaching for a paper towel, my mind defaulting to the role of the cleaner. "Look at you," Diane sneered, standing over me. "Always making a mess." "I hate you," I whispered. I looked up at her. "I actually hate you." Diane's face contorted. The mask of civility vanished completely. She swung her hand. It was a hard, open-palmed slap that caught me right on the cheekbone. The force of it knocked me backward. My boots slipped on the pumpkin filling. I lost my balance. I crashed onto the floor. My hips slammed against the hard tile. My head hit the cabinet door with a dull thud. For a second, there was no sound but the rushing of blood in my ears. The sting on my cheek was hot and immediate. I lay there, stunned. I looked up. Diane was breathing heavily, staring at her hand, then at me. There was no apology in her eyes, only a dare. What are you going to do about it? My eyes shifted past Diane. Through the open doorway that connected the kitchen to the dining room, I saw her. Grandma Eleanor. She was sitting at the table, her plate in front of her. She had turned in her chair. She was looking directly into the kitchen. She had seen it. She had seen Diane shove the pie. She had seen Diane slap me. She had seen me fall. Grandma, I whispered. Our eyes locked. I waited for it. I waited for the outrage. I waited for her to stand up and shout, to summon the authority of the matriarch and banish this woman who had just assaulted her granddaughter. But Eleanor did nothing. She looked at me, lying in the wreckage of my pie, holding my stinging cheek. Her face was a mask of stone. Her eyes were cold, unreadable. Then, slowly, she turned her head back to her plate. She picked up her fork. She took a bite of turkey. The silence of her reaction was louder than the slap. It was a physical blow to my chest. She was not just a witness. She was a bystander. She had chosen the path of least resistance. She had chosen to let me bleed rather than spill her wine. The betrayal was total. It burned through me, hotter than the shame, hotter than the anger. I pushed myself up. My hands were sticky with maple filling. My hip throbbed. I used the counter to pull myself to my feet. Diane took a step back, perhaps realizing she had gone too far, or perhaps afraid I would hit her back. "Clean this up," Diane whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Before the children see." I looked at her. I looked at the mess on the floor. "No," I said. My voice was steady. It surprised me. I grabbed a dish towel and wiped the pumpkin off my hands. I threw the towel on the floor, right on top of the shattered pie. I walked past Diane. I walked out of the kitchen. The dining room was quiet. My father and Evan were looking at their phones, oblivious. Brooke was picking at her salad. They looked up as I entered. They saw the red mark blooming on my cheek. They saw the pumpkin smeared on my trousers. "Rachel?" my father asked, frowning. "What happened? Did you drop something?" I did not answer him. I walked to the coat rack. I grabbed my coat. I grabbed my keys. "Rachel?" Evan asked. "Where are you going? We have not had dessert." I turned to face them. I stood there, clutching my keys so hard the metal bit into my palm. I looked at my father, who looked confused. I looked at Evan, who looked annoyed. And I looked at Grandma Eleanor, who was staring studiously at her water glass. "I am leaving," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a knife. "I am not staying for another minute." "Don't be dramatic," Diane said, appearing in the doorway behind me. She was smoothing her apron, composing herself. She dropped the pie and got upset. "It was an accident." "It was not an accident," I said, looking straight at my father. "She hit me." "What?" My father stood up halfway. "She is lying," Diane shrieked immediately. "She is hysterical. She slipped on the floor and now she is blaming me because she is embarrassed." My father looked at Diane, then at me. He looked at the red mark on my face. "Rachel," he said, his voice pleading, "calm down. Let's just talk about this. Sit down." "No," I said. "I am done sitting down. I am done serving you. I am done being the help." I turned to the door. "If you walk out that door," Diane yelled, her voice rising to a screech, "do not bother coming back. You ruin every holiday. Go ahead. Go. See if anyone cares." I opened the door. The cold, wet air of the night hit my face, cooling the burning skin of my cheek. It felt like freedom. I did not look back. I stepped out into the rain. The sound of the door slamming behind me echoing like a gunshot, signaling the end of the war I had been losing for 15 years. I was walking away, and for the first time, I was not leaving anything behind that I needed to keep. The drive back to Portland was a blur of interstate lights and windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the freezing rain. My phone, which was sitting in the cup holder, kept vibrating. It buzzed against the plastic like an angry hornet. I did not look at it. I knew who it was. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a dull ache in my cheek and a hollow, shaking feeling in my chest. I had done it. I had walked out. But the silence in the car felt less like victory and more like exile. When I finally pulled into the parking garage of my condo building, I turned off the engine and sat in the dark for a moment. Then, I picked up my phone. The notifications were a wall of text. Diane, 7:14 p.m. You should be ashamed of yourself. Leaving like that? The children are crying. You have ruined the entire night. Evan, 7:22 p.m. Seriously? You just walked out? Brooke had to clear the table by herself. Thanks a lot for the drama. Rachel, hope you are happy. Diane, 7:45 p.m. Do not expect an apology. You are the one who owes us. Your father is heartbroken. Not a single text asked if I was okay. Not one person asked if my face hurt. Not one person asked if I had arrived home safely in the storm. I opened Facebook. My thumb hovered over the app, a habit born of boredom, but tonight it felt like opening a door I knew had a tiger behind it. And there it was, top of my feed, posted 40 minutes ago. It was a photo of the dining table. The turkey was carved. The candles were lit. The wine glasses were full. But in the foreground, my empty chair was pulled out slightly, a stark gap in the warmth. Diane had captioned it. Such a bittersweet Thanksgiving. The food is delicious. The family is here. But one seat is empty. It breaks a mother's heart when someone decides that their own ego is more important than family tradition. We miss you, even if you do not want to be here. Prayers for peace in our hearts tonight. Family, first Thanksgiving, heartbreak. I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. She had weaponized my absence before my engine had even cooled. The comments were already rolling in. Susan Miller. Oh no, Diane. Sending hugs. Kids these days just do not understand sacrifice. Pastor John. Praying for your family. Diane. The prodigal child often brings the most pain, but forgiveness is our path. Mrs. Gable. Evan's mother-in-law. So selfish. You worked so hard on that meal. She does not deserve you. I felt the blood rushing to my ears. They were painting a masterpiece, and I was the villain. I was the selfish, bratty daughter who stomped out because she did not get her way. They were erasing the slap. They were erasing the 15 years of servitude. They were erasing the truth. For years, I would have closed the app. I would have cried in my bathroom and let them win because fighting back was tacky, because family matters stay private. But tonight, my cheek was still throbbing. Tonight, I was done protecting the people who hurt me. I opened my laptop. I sat at my kitchen island, still wearing my coat. I opened a blank post. My fingers hovered over the keys. I did not write a rant. I did not use all caps. I wrote a deposition. I am seeing a lot of comments about why I left dinner tonight, I typed. And since my stepmother has decided to make this a public conversation, I think it is fair that I provide the full context. I wrote for 20 minutes. I detailed the timeline. I explained the dinner guest agreement. I listed the tasks I was assigned within 5 minutes of walking through the door. I described the scene in the kitchen. I described the pie. I described the insults. And then, I described the slap. Tonight, I was not just insulted. I was physically assaulted in the kitchen because my pie crust had walnuts in it. My stepmother, Diane, hit me across the face and shoved me to the floor. My family watched. My father saw the mark on my face. My brother saw the food on my clothes. And when I tried to leave, they told me I was ruining the mood. I paused. I took a breath. I left tonight not because I have an ego. I left because after 15 years of being the unpaid nanny, the kitchen staff, and the punching bag, I realized that a seat at the table is not worth the price of my dignity. If anyone else out there has ever been treated like free labor just because they are single and childless, You know exactly why I walked out. Family is not a license to abuse people. I set the privacy to public. I hit post. The silence in my apartment was absolute. But on the screen, the noise began almost instantly. It started with my friends, Sarah, who was already up at the mountain cabin. Commented first, "OMFG. Rachel, I am so sorry. I am shaking. Are you okay? Do you need me to come down there?" Then came my coworkers. Then people from college I had not spoken to in years. "This is brave, Rachel. I had no idea. The single tax in families is real. Good for you for walking out." "She hit you? That is assault. Call the police." Within an hour, the post had 50 shares, then 100. It was rippling out beyond my immediate circle. Strangers were sharing it. Women's groups were sharing it. It was tapping into a vein of collective resentment that I did not even know existed. The army of daughters and aunts who were tired of being the designated help. My phone started ringing. It was my father. I declined it. Then Evan, declined. Then Diane, declined. They were panicking. They had expected me to sulk in silence. They had not expected me to burn the house down with the truth. An hour later, Diane responded, not directly to me, but with a new status update. Diane Pierce. It is truly sad when someone has to invent stories to get attention. We are shocked by the lies being spread tonight. There was no assault, just a clumsy accident and a lot of histrionics from someone who has always struggled with emotional stability. We love Rachel, but we will not be bullied by her delusions. Please respect our privacy. It was the classic Darvo maneuver: deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. She was painting me as the crazy one, the unstable one. My father commented under it, "Rachel, please take this down. We can talk about this tomorrow. This is not how we handle things." I watched the battle lines being drawn in real time. The church ladies were siding with Diane. The younger generation, my friends, and total strangers were rallying behind me. I refreshed the notifications on my post. Like, love, wow, share, like. And then, one notification caught my eye. It was buried in a sea of strangers, but the name stood out like a beacon. Eleanor Pierce likes this. I froze. I blinked and looked closer. I clicked on the profile. It was her. It was a bare-bones account, created years ago so she could see photos of the great-grandchildren. It had a picture of a flower as the avatar. Grandma Eleanor. The woman who had sat silently at the table. The woman who had watched me fall and turned back to her turkey. The woman who I thought had betrayed me completely. She had not commented. She had not shared. She had simply pressed like on the post where I detailed exactly how her daughter-in-law had abused me. A like is a small thing. Usually, it means nothing. But in the context of my grandmother, a woman who avoided conflict like the plague, who lived under my father's roof, who relied on Diane for her daily care, it was a scream. It was a quiet digital rebellion. Why? Why would she do that? Was it a mistake? Did her finger slip? Or was it a signal? I stared at her name on the screen, Eleanor Pierce. A confusion washed over me, mixing with the anger. If she agreed with me, why did not she speak up in the kitchen? Why let me walk out alone? But as I looked at that little thumbs-up icon, I felt a strange shift in my chest. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was curiosity. It felt like she was sliding a note under a locked door. It felt like she was saying, "I see you, I heard you, and I am not as asleep as they think I am." I sat back in my chair, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating the dark kitchen. The war had officially begun. They were going to come for me with everything they had. The accusations of mental instability, the gaslighting, the pressure. But I looked at that notification again. Eleanor Pierce likes this. I was not as alone as I thought. Something was happening. The silence of the matriarch might not have been emptiness after all. It might have been the calm before a different kind of storm. And for the first time that night, amidst the wreckage of my family, I felt a tiny, flickering spark of hope. The morning after Thanksgiving did not bring clarity. It brought a coordinated assault. I woke up with a headache that throbbed behind my eyes, a physical hangover from the adrenaline spike of the night before. Outside my window, the city of Portland was gray and wet, business as usual, but inside the glowing rectangle of my phone, my world was being systematically dismantled. The silence from my family had ended. In its place was a cacophony of carefully curated noise. Diane had fired the first shot at 7 o'clock in the morning. It was a long, rambling status update, the kind that was designed to garner sympathy from the church group while assassinating my character between the lines. She did not tag me, she did not name me, but in a small town, anonymity is a thin veil. It is so hard when you open your heart and home to a child who is not your own, only to be met with constant hostility. She wrote, "We have tried for 17 years to build bridges. We have walked on eggshells. But sometimes, mental illness and deep-seated jealousy make it impossible for people to accept love. We are just praying for peace today, and for certain people to find the professional help they clearly still need." I read it twice, my stomach churning. Mental illness. She was diagnosing me on Facebook. She was taking my justified anger at being slapped and repackaging it as a symptom of a disordered mind. The comments were a chorus of validation. "You are a saint, Diane," wrote the woman who sat 3 pews behind us at Christmas service. "Some people are just broken, and you cannot fix them." I wanted to scream. I wanted to reply. But before I could even formulate a thought, I saw the notification from my father. This was the one that broke me. Diane's cruelty was expected. She was the stepmother. She was the villain in the script. But Thomas Pierce was supposed to be the neutral party. He was supposed to be the one who secretly loved me best, even if he was too weak to show it. He had posted a photo of me from when I was 16 years old. In the picture, I looked pale and thin, standing in the backyard, unsmiling. His caption read, "Looking at old photos and remembering how hard it has been since Rachel's mother passed. We got her so much counseling back then, and we thought she had worked through that darkness. It breaks a father's heart to see that the instability is still there, manifesting in outbursts like last night. We just want her to be well. We just want her to come back to us when she is stable." I dropped the phone on the bed as if it were burning hot. He had done it. He had taken the most painful period of my life, the year after my mother died, when I was grieving and lost, and weaponized it. He was using my grief to discredit my testimony. He was telling the world that I was not a victim of abuse. I was just a damaged girl who had never recovered from losing her mommy. It was a masterstroke of manipulation. It garnered him immense sympathy while simultaneously stripping me of any credibility. Who would believe the unstable girl over the grieving, patient father? Then came Evan, my brother, who had laughed while I cleaned up his children's messes, decided to join the fray. He posted a series of anecdotes from our teenage years. He recounted the time I cried because they forgot my birthday, framing it as Rachel has always been a drama queen who needs to be the center of attention. He told a story about me yelling at him when he broke my laptop, leaving out the part where he had done it on purpose, and spun it as, "She has always had a violent temper." My phone pinged with a text from Mrs. Higgins, a neighbor I had known since I was a child. "Rachel, honey, I saw your dad's post. Maybe you should just apologize. Family is everything. Do not let your pride ruin this." Then another text, this one from a colleague at Northwind Collective. "Hey Rachel, are you okay? I saw some weird comments on that post you made last night. Someone named Diane is tagging our HR director in the comments saying she is worried about your volatile behavior. You might want to check that." The blood drained from my face. They were not just venting. They were coming for my life. They were tagging my employer. They were trying to paint me as unsafe, as a liability. I sat at my kitchen island, shaking. I felt cornered. I felt like a fox being hunted by hounds, with nowhere to run. I deleted my original post, thinking it might stop the bleeding, but it was too late. Screenshots had been taken. The narrative was out of my hands. And then, at noon, Diane dropped the nuclear bomb. She posted an image, It was a photograph of a piece of paper. I squinted at the screen, and when I realized what it was, the room spun. It was a printout of an email I had sent to my high school guidance counselor when I was 17 years old. I remembered writing it. It was 2 years after Dad married Diane. I was drowning in schoolwork and household chores. I was lonely. I had written to Mrs. Gable, the counselor, asking for help with my college applications because I felt like I had no support at home. But Diane had not posted the whole email. She had folded the paper. She had cropped the image. The part she posted read, "I just want it to stop. I feel like I'm going to disappear if I stay here. Sometimes I think it would be better if I just wasn't around anymore." In the original email, the next sentence was, "Because then maybe I could go to college in a different state and start over." But without that context, the snippet looked like a suicide note. It looked like a threat of self-harm. Diane's caption was simple and devastating. "We found this in her old files today. We have been dealing with this level of manipulation and threats of self-harm for years. We are terrified for her safety, but we cannot let her hold the family hostage with her threats anymore. She was framing me as suicidal to cover up the fact that she had hit me. She was using a 15-year-old cry for help to prove that I was crazy." I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was being crushed by a hydraulic press. This was my private medical history. This was a confidential conversation with a counselor. How did she even have this? She must have dug through boxes of my old school records in the attic. I felt violated in a way that was deeper than the slap. The slap was physical. This was an invasion of my soul. I reached for my water glass and knocked it over. It shattered on the floor, the sound echoing the chaos in my mind. I needed help. I could not fight this with Facebook posts. I was drowning. I called Sarah. She picked up on the first ring. "I saw it," she said immediately. Her voice was hard, furious. "Rachel, get in the car. You are coming to the cabin." "I can't," I choked out. "They are tagging my job. Sarah, they are leaking my emails. I can't go on vacation. I am going to lose everything." "Okay," Sarah said. "Okay. Listen to me. Do not post anything else. Do not reply to them. Do not text them. I am sending you a number right now. Her name is Monica Hale. She is a shark. She handled my cousin's divorce when her ex tried to destroy her business. Call her, now." "A lawyer?" I asked. "Sarah, they are my family." "No, they are not," Sarah said firmly. "Family does not leak your teenage therapy emails to the internet. They are enemies. Treat them like enemies." I hung up. My hands were trembling so badly I had to set the phone on the table to dial the number Sarah sent. Monica Hale, attorney at law. It rang 3 times. "Hale Law, this is Monica," a voice answered. It was deep, raspy, and sounded like it had no time for nonsense. "Hi," I stammered. "My name is Rachel Pierce. Sarah Jenkins told me to call you. I have a situation with my family." "The Thanksgiving viral post?" Monica asked. I blinked. "You saw it?" "Honey, I practice law in Oregon. Half my feed is talking about the pumpkin pie slap. Can you be at my office in an hour? I have a cancellation at 2:00. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I can be there." Monica Hale's office was in downtown Portland, in a brick building that smelled of old coffee and expensive mahogany. Monica herself was a woman in her 50s, with short steel gray hair and glasses that hung on a chain around her neck. She did not look like a TV lawyer. She looked like a woman who chopped wood for exercise. She sat me down in a leather chair and pushed a box of tissues toward me. "Talk," she said. "Start from the pie. End with the email." I talked. I told her everything. I told her about the years of babysitting, the insults, the slap, the silence of my grandmother, the posts this morning. When I got to the part about the email, Monica held up a hand. "Stop," she said. "Show me." I pulled up the screenshot on my phone. Monica put on her glasses and leaned in. She studied the image for a long time. Then she leaned back and took off her glasses. "Where is the original email?" she asked. I might be able to access my old high school account," I said. "Or I can ask the school district." Find it, she ordered, because that right there, that is the nail in their coffin. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain. Rachel, she said, turning back to me, you came here thinking this is a family dispute. You think this is just drama. You think you are here to ask how to get them to stop being mean to you. Aren't I? I asked. No, Monica said. Her voice was cold and sharp. You are here because you are the victim of defamation of character, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and public disclosure of private facts. They are not just being mean. They are breaking the law. She walked back to her desk and picked up a pen. They have contacted your employer, she listed, ticking off points on her fingers. That is tortious interference with business relations. They have published a misleadingly edited private document to imply you are mentally unstable. That is libel. They have publicly accused you of being dangerous. That is defamation per se. I stared at her. So, I can sue them? You can destroy them, Monica corrected. But you have to decide right now if you have the stomach for it, because once we file this, there is no going back to Christmas dinner. There is no hugging it out. If we do this, we are going to war. I looked down at my hands. I thought about my father. I thought about the way he used to read to me when I was little. I thought about the way he hugged me at the door yesterday, a hug that was a lie. Then I thought about the email. I thought about the 17-year-old girl who just wanted to go to college, and how Diane had twisted her pain into a weapon to humiliate the 32-year-old woman she had become. They had not hesitated. They had not stopped to think about my feelings. They had tried to ruin me to save their own reputation. They tried to get me fired, I whispered. Yes, Monica said. They did. They told the world I was suicidal. Yes. They hit me. And then they lied about it, Monica added. I took a deep breath. The trembling in my hands stopped. A cold, hard weight settled in my stomach. It was the weight of a bridge burning, the final timber collapsing into the river. Where do I sign? I asked. Monica slid a document across the desk. It was a retainer agreement and a power of attorney. This authorizes me to act on your behalf, she said. It authorizes me to send cease and desist letters. It authorizes me to file a complaint in civil court. I picked up the pen. The ink was black. I hesitated for one fraction of a second. I saw my father's face in my mind. Do it for me, Rachel. Keep the peace. No, I said aloud. I pressed the pen to the paper. I wrote my name, Rachel Pierce. The signature looked sharp. It looked aggressive. I pushed the paper back to Monica. Good, Monica said. She slipped the paper into a folder. Now, first things first, I'm going to draft a letter to Diane and Thomas demanding the immediate removal of those posts and a retraction, and I am going to send a letter to your HR department informing them that you are the victim of a targeted harassment campaign and that legal action is pending. Thank you, I said. I felt lightheaded. Don't thank me yet, Monica warned. This is going to get ugly. They are going to double down before they fold. Narcissists always do. They will tell everyone you are suing your own father for money. They will play the victim. Let them, I said. I stood up, buttoning my coat. They can say whatever they want. I am done listening. I walked to the door. Oh, and Rachel? Monica called out. I turned back. Do not delete anything else, she said, a small, predatory smile playing on her lips. Let them keep posting. Every lie they tell is another zero on the check they are going to write you. I walked out of the office and into the rain. The city looked different now. It didn't look gray and depressing. It looked clean. I checked my phone. There were 10 new messages from Evan, 5 from Diane. I didn't open them. I didn't feel the urge to explain myself. I didn't feel the need to apologize. I had a lawyer. I had a case. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just Rachel the doormat. I was Rachel the plaintiff. And I was coming for them. 3 days after I signed the retainer agreement with Monica Hale, the rain in Oregon had turned from a drizzle into a deluge. It was a Tuesday afternoon, gray and suffocating. When my phone buzzed, I expected another harassing text from Evan or a notification that Diane had posted another prayer request that was actually a character assassination. But the name on the screen was Grandma Landline. I stared at it. My thumb hovered over the red button. Part of me wanted to reject the call. In my mind, Eleanor Pierce was a collaborator. She was the woman who had watched me fall and then returned to her turkey. She was the Switzerland of our family war, neutral to the point of complicity. But then I remembered the notification. Eleanor Pierce likes this. That single, silent digital thumb up on my post. I slid the bar to answer. Rachel? Her voice sounded thin, battling against the static of an old cordless phone. Hi, Grandma, I said, my voice guarded. I sat up straighter in my office chair at Northwind Collective, turning away from my colleagues. I need to see you, she said. There was no preamble. No, how are you? Meet me at the Roasted Bean on 4th Street, in an hour. Grandma, I am working, I said. And honestly, I do not think it is a good idea. My lawyer told me not to speak to anyone in the family without her present. This is not a family visit, Eleanor said. Her voice had a steeliness I rarely heard. And tell your lawyer she will want you to take this meeting. Come alone, 4th Street, please. The line went dead. I sat there for a moment, listening to the hum of the office, curiosity, that dangerous thing, won out over caution. I told my boss I had a family emergency, which was technically true, considering my family was currently imploding, and drove to the cafe. The Roasted Bean was a small, dimly lit place that smelled of burnt espresso and damp wool. It was empty, save for a barista reading a book and a small figure sitting in the back corner booth. Eleanor Pierce looked older than I remembered. She was wearing a beige raincoat that swallowed her small frame, and her hands were wrapped around a mug of hot tea. She looked frail. For a second, my anger wavered, replaced by instinctual concern. But then the image of her eating turkey while I lay on the floor flashed in my mind, and the ice returned to my veins. I walked over and sat down opposite her. I did not take off my coat. I kept my purse on my lap, a physical barrier between us. I have 20 minutes, I said. It was cold, but I needed to protect myself. Eleanor looked up. Her blue eyes were clear, sharp, and entirely devoid of the senility Diane liked to claim she suffered from. You are angry, she stated. I am suing your son and his wife, I said. Angry does not even cover it. Grandma, I am done. Good, she said. I blinked. Excuse me? I said, good, Eleanor repeated. She took a sip of tea, her hand trembling slightly. It is about time you stood up. I was worried you would just swallow it again, like you always do. I felt a flush of heat rise in my neck. You watched, I accused, my voice dropping to a hiss so the barista wouldn't hear. You sat there, Grandma. Diane hit me. She shoved me. And you ate your dinner. You did not say a word. You broke my heart that night. I know, she said softly. She did not look away. She did not apologize. I know I did, and I'm sorry for the pain it caused you in that moment. But, Rachel? She reached into her large handbag. She pulled out 2 items and placed them on the scarred wooden table between us. One was an old smartphone, an iPhone 7 that I thought she had lost years ago. The screen was cracked, but it was powered on. The other was a USB drive. If I had shouted, Eleanor said, her voice steady, it would have been a he said, she said argument. Thomas would have taken her side, Evan would have lied, and you would be the hysterical daughter making accusations. She pushed the phone toward me. But a camera, she whispered, does not have an opinion. I stared at the phone. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. What is this? I saw her face when you walked into the kitchen with the pie. Eleanor said, I saw the way she looked at you. I knew something was going to happen. I have known Diane for 20 years. Rachel, I know when she is ready to snap. So, when she followed you into the kitchen, I put my phone against the centerpiece. I hit record. My hands shook as I picked up the phone. I unlocked it. The passcode was still my birthday. I realized with a jolt. and went to the gallery. The most recent video was dated Thanksgiving Day. I pressed play. The angle was low, shooting through the gap between the dining room door frame and a vase of flowers. It was not a perfect cinematic shot, but the audio was crystal clear, and the visual was undeniable. On the small screen, I saw myself standing by the counter. I saw Diane cornering me. I heard every word of the argument. "You are an ungrateful, selfish girl." I saw her hand grab the pie plate. I saw the deliberate, forceful shove. I saw the pie fly. And then, I saw the slap. It was shocking to watch it from a third-person perspective. It looked violent. The sound of the impact, crack, was sickeningly loud in the quiet cafe. I saw myself fall. I heard Diane say, "Look what you made me do." I stopped the video. I couldn't watch anymore. I looked up at my grandmother. Tears were streaming down my face, but I didn't feel sad. I felt validated. It wasn't in my head. I hadn't exaggerated. It had happened exactly as I said it had. "You have it," I whispered. "You have proof." "I do," Eleanor said. "And so do you. That is the copy on the USB drive." "Why?" I asked, wiping my eyes furiously. "Why did you wait? Why didn't you show this to Dad immediately?" "Because your father is weak," Eleanor said, and the disdain in her voice was startling. "He would have made me delete it. He would have guilted me. He would have said, 'Mom, don't ruin the family. And I am an old woman. Rachel, I live in their house. I depend on them for my rides to the doctor, for my meals. I was afraid." She reached out and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was dry and paper-thin. "I have been a coward for a long time," she admitted. "I watched them treat you like a servant. I slipped you money. I gave you food. But I never stopped them. I thought keeping the peace was the most important thing. But when she hit you, when I saw my granddaughter on the floor..." She reached into her bag again. This time, she pulled out a worn black moleskin notebook. The cover was peeling. "The video is for the court," she said. This is for you, to remind you that you are not crazy." I opened the notebook. The pages were filled with Eleanor's cramped, spiderweb handwriting. I turned to a random page. December 25th, 2015. Rachel arrived at 10 o'clock. Diane immediately sent her to the basement to wrap gifts for Evan's girlfriend. Rachel missed lunch. Thomas did nothing. Diane told the guests Rachel was antisocial. Lie. I turned another page. July 4th, 2018. Barbecue. Rachel grilled for 3 hours in the sun. No one brought her a drink. Diane told her she looked heavy in her shorts. Rachel cried in the bathroom. I should have gone to her. I didn't. I flipped through the pages. Years of entries, dates, times, direct quotes. Every time Diane had insulted me, every time Evan had dumped his kids on me, every time my father had looked the other way. It was a log of my abuse, a dossier of my exploitation. "You wrote it all down," I whispered. "I wanted to remember," Eleanor said. "I knew they would try to gaslight you. I knew they would try to make you think you were imagining it. I kept a record." She closed the book and pushed it toward me. "I am ready. Rachel," she said. "I am ready to tell the truth. I will testify. I will give this to your lawyer. I will sit on that stand, and I will tell a judge exactly what kind of people they are." "Grandma," I said, my voice trembling, "if you do that, Dad will never forgive you. Diane will kick you out." "Let them," Eleanor said. She straightened her spine, and for a moment, she looked 6 feet tall. "I have enough money in my pension. I can find a place, or maybe a nice nursing home where the food is terrible, but the people are kind. I do not care anymore. I am 81 years old. I am tired of watching evil win because good people are polite." She looked at me, her eyes wet. "I failed you for a long time, Rachel. I let them use you because I was scared of being alone, but I will not let them destroy you. Not this time." I stood up. I didn't care about the barista. I didn't care about the protocol or the distance I had planned to keep. I walked around the table and wrapped my arms around her. She felt like a bird, all hollow bones and fragility, but she hugged me back with a strength that surprised me. I buried my face in her shoulder, smelling the lavender soap she always used, and I wept. I cried for the little girl who had been lonely. I cried for the teenager who had been a nanny. And I cried because, finally, someone in this family loved me enough to burn the house down for me. "Thank you," I sobbed into her raincoat. "Thank you." "Dry your eyes," she whispered, patting my back. "We have work to do. Take me to your lawyer." An hour later, we were in Monica Hale's office. Monica was not an emotional woman. She was a creature of logic, statutes, and ruthless strategy. But when she watched the video on her computer screen, her eyes widened. She watched it once, then she watched it again in slow motion. Then she opened the notebook. She spent 10 minutes flipping through the pages, reading the entries Eleanor pointed out. Finally, Monica leaned back in her chair. A slow, terrifying grin spread across her face. It was the smile of a predator who had just realized the prey was limping. "Rachel," Monica said, looking at me, "this changes everything." "It proves I wasn't lying," I said. "It does a lot more than that," Monica corrected. She tapped the notebook. "Before today, we had a defamation case. We were fighting to clear your name. We were on the defensive." She picked up the USB drive. "With this, and with Eleanor's testimony?" Monica stood up and began pacing the room, her energy electric. "We are not just defending anymore. We are attacking. This establishes a pattern of abuse. This proves malice. This proves that their recent posts aren't just concern. They are a calculated continuation of a decades-long campaign of emotional and financial exploitation." She turned to Eleanor. "Mrs. Pierce, you understand that if we use this, your son will likely be named as a co-conspirator in the emotional distress claim. He stood by. He enabled it." Eleanor gripped the handle of her cane. She looked at the floor for a second, then up at Monica. "Thomas made his choice when he posted that photo of Rachel yesterday," Eleanor said. "He chose his wife over his daughter. Now, I am choosing mine." Monica nodded, clearly impressed. "All right, I am going to draft an amended complaint. We are adding assault and battery against Diane. We are adding intentional infliction of emotional distress against all of them. And we are going to use this notebook to refute every single lie they have told on Facebook." She looked at me. "Rachel, they tried to paint you as unstable. We are going to prove that the only instability in that house was the toxic environment they created. They handed us a knife, but your grandmother just gave us a bazooka." I looked at Eleanor. She was sitting in the oversized leather chair, looking tired but resolute. For the first time since Thanksgiving, the knot of dread in my stomach began to loosen. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I wasn't just a plaintiff with a sad story. I was armed. "What do we do now?" I asked. Monica smiled. "Now, we wait for them to make one more mistake, and then we drop the hammer." I drove Grandma Eleanor back to the house. I stopped the car a block away, as she requested, so Diane wouldn't see us together. "Are you sure you will be okay?" I asked, looking at her anxiously. "I am terrified of leaving you there with them." "I have survived that house for 20 years, Eleanor said, unbuckling her seatbelt. "I can survive a few more weeks. Besides, I need to pack." She opened the door, then paused. "Rachel," she said. "Yes, Grandma?" "That pie," she said, a small, mischievous smile touching her lips. "The one you made." "Yes?" "It smelled delicious," she said. "When this is all over, will you make me another one? With the walnut crust?" I choked out a laugh, tears springing to my eyes again. "I will make you 100 pies. Grandma, I promise." "Good," she said. "I never liked the store-bought ones anyway." She stepped out into the rain and opened her umbrella. I watched her walk slowly down the street, a small gray figure against the darkening sky. She wasn't just an old woman anymore. She was a spy. She was a warrior. She was my grandmother. I drove away feeling a sensation I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just relief, it was hope. The silence that had haunted my childhood hadn't been emptiness, it had been a gathering of strength. And now, finally, the storm was about to break. The civil trial began on a Tuesday morning under a sky that was the color of a bruised plum. The courtroom was smaller than I had expected, smelling of floor wax and stale anxiety. On the left side of the aisle sat my family: Thomas, Diane, Evan, and Brooke. They were dressed in a coordinated palette of navy blue and charcoal gray, looking for all the world like a model family from a brochure about estate planning. They sat close together, shoulders touching, a united front of respectability. On the right side, there was just me and Monica Hale. I felt a phantom ache in my cheek. Though the bruise had faded weeks ago, the real injury was the one I could feel radiating from the other table, the collective glare of 4 people who had convinced themselves that I was the villain for refusing to be their victim anymore. Their strategy became clear the moment their lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Sterling with a voice like oiled leather, stood up for his opening statement. "Your Honor," he began, gesturing toward my family with a sweeping, protective hand. "This is a tragedy, not because of any malice, but because of a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by a young woman who has unfortunately always struggled to distinguish between reality and her own emotional turbulence." I gripped the edge of the table. Monica placed a hand on my arm, her touch heavy and grounding. "We will show," Mr. Sterling continued, "that the defendants did nothing but try to love a difficult child. The alleged assault was nothing more than an accidental collision in a crowded kitchen during a stressful holiday. And the social media posts? They were merely the desperate cries of parents trying to defend themselves against a public smear campaign orchestrated by a daughter addicted to drama. They were not denying the conflict. They were pathologizing me. They were painting a picture of Rachel the hysteric, the damaged orphan who saw monsters where there were only loving parents. The morning was a parade of humiliations. They submitted evidence, screenshots of my old Facebook statuses from college where I complained about exam stress, framed as evidence of instability. They submitted affidavits from neighbors who said I always seemed sullen at family gatherings. But the hardest blow came when my father took the stand. Thomas Pierce walked to the witness box with a heavy, reluctant gait. He looked older than he had at Thanksgiving. His shoulders were slumped. He looked like a man carrying a great burden, and I knew, with a sick feeling in my stomach, that I was the burden. "Mr. Pierce," Mr. Sterling asked gently, "how would you describe your relationship with your daughter?" My father sighed. He looked at me for a fleeting second, his eyes filled with a watery, cowardly sadness, before looking away. "I love Rachel," he said. His voice was soft, the voice I remembered reading me bedtime stories. "I have always loved her, but it has been hard. Since her mother died, she has had a tendency to exaggerate." "Exaggerate?" Mr. Sterling prompted. "Yes," my father said. "She feels things very deeply. Sometimes, she perceives slights where there are none. She takes a simple request for help and turns it into a personal attack. We have walked on eggshells for years, trying not to upset her." "And the night of Thanksgiving?" "It was chaotic," Thomas said. "Diane was stressed. Rachel was agitated about her pie. I did not see the fall, but I know my wife, Diane, would never hurt anyone intentionally. Rachel she spun out, like she used to when she was a teenager." I felt tears prick my eyes, hot and sharp. It was not the lie that hurt. It was the specific flavor of the lie. He was using his intimate knowledge of my grief, my teenage years of mourning my mother, to dismantle my credibility as an adult. He was rewriting my history, turning my pain into a defect. "So, you believe her claims of abuse are false?" "I believe," my father said, pausing to wipe his eye, "that Rachel believes them, but that does not make them true. She has a problem with the truth when she is emotional." I looked down at my hands. I felt stripped bare. To have your own father sit 5 feet away and calmly tell a judge that you are effectively delusional is a pain that has no language. It was a betrayal so profound it made the room swim. "He is good," Monica whispered to me, her voice devoid of sympathy. purely analytical. But he just opened the door for us. When it was our turn, Monica Hale did not use soft words. She did not sigh. She stood up like a gladiator entering the arena. "Your Honor," Monica said, "the defense has spent 3 hours painting the plaintiff as a liar and a person of unstable mental health. They claim the defendants are loving victims. We would like to introduce Plaintiff's Exhibit A." The screen at the front of the courtroom lit up. It was the screenshot of the email Diane had posted, the one that made me look suicidal. "This," Monica said, pointing to the screen, "is the image Diane Pierce posted to Facebook on November 26th. It suggests Rachel Pierce was threatening self-harm at age 17. Monica clicked a button. A second image appeared next to it. "And this," she declared, her voice rising, "is the actual unedited email, retrieved from the school district's archives. You will see that the sentence Mrs. Pierce cropped out, because then I could go to college, changes the meaning entirely." A murmur went through the room. The judge, a stern woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, leaned forward. "Mrs. Pierce," Monica said, turning to look directly at Diane, who was sitting rigid in her seat, "did not just share a private medical sentiment, she doctorally altered it to make her stepdaughter look mentally incompetent. That is not the act of a concerned mother. That is the act of a woman manufacturing a narrative." Diane's face flushed a patchy, ugly red. Evan shifted uncomfortably in his suit. "But let us address the accidental collision," Monica continued. "The defense claims the kitchen incident was a misunderstanding, a he said she said situation." She paused. The silence in the room was absolute. "We would like to introduce Plaintiff's Exhibit B, a video recording taken on the night of November 24th. Thomas's head snapped up. Evan froze. Diane frowned, looking confused. They did not know. They had no idea. Monica pressed play. The audio filled the courtroom. It was tinny, but unmistakable. The sound of plates clattering, the hum of the refrigerator, and then Diane's voice, sharp and venomous. "You are an ungrateful, selfish girl." On the screen, the shaky footage showed the kitchen. It showed me standing by the counter. It showed Diane lunging. The shove was clear. It was violent. It was deliberate. The pie flew off the counter. And then came the slap. Crack. The sound echoed off the wood paneling of the courtroom. It was a brutal, ugly sound. On the screen, I fell. Then came the voice of Diane standing over me. "Look what you made me do. You are just a parasite. Rachel, feeding off us for years. Clean this up." The video ended. For 3 seconds, nobody breathed. The contrast between the polite, cashmere-clad woman sitting at the defense table and the shrieking banshee on the screen was absolute. Diane was pale, her mouth slightly open. Thomas looked like he had been shot. He stared at the blank screen, his face draining of all color. He had not seen it. He had chosen to believe his wife's lie. And now the truth was 10 feet high and undeniably violent. "Mr. Sterling jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor. We have not seen this evidence. We do not know the provenance of this video. It could be a deepfake. It is out of context." "Out of context?" Monica countered, her voice icy. "The context is assault. Counselor. But if you want more context, let us play the 30 seconds before, where Rachel asked to leave, where she tries to de-escalate." She played the clip again. It showed me backing away. It showed me trying to leave. "This is not a collision," Monica said, turning to the judge. "This is battery, and the subsequent social media campaign calling my client a liar? That is malice." "Who took this video?" Mr. Sterling demanded, looking desperate. "The plaintiff was holding a pie. She could not have filmed it." "The plaintiff did not film it," Monica said. She smiled, a sharp, dangerous expression. "The defense has argued that the family is united against Rachel, that everyone agrees she is the problem. We would like to call our final witness to rebut that claim." Monica turned to the bailiff. "The plaintiff calls Eleanor Pierce." The double doors at the back of the courtroom opened. The sound of a cane tapping against the floor tile was the only noise in the room. Tap, step, tap, step. My grandmother walked in. She was wearing her best Sunday suit, a deep navy blue, and a hat with a small brim. She looked small, but she moved with a determination that made her seem formidable. The reaction from the defense table was visceral. "Mom?" Thomas whispered. He half rose from his chair, his eyes wide with shock. Diane grabbed his arm, her fingernails digging into his suit jacket. She stared at Eleanor with a look of pure, unadulterated horror. They realized, in that second, who had held the camera. Eleanor did not look at them. She walked past her son. She walked past her grandson. She walked past the daughter-in-law who had ruled her house for 20 years. She walked straight to the witness stand and sat down. "State your name for the record," the clerk said. "Eleanor Rose Pierce," she said. Her voice was not raspy today. It was clear. It was strong. "Mrs. Pierce?" Monica asked, approaching the stand gently. "You are the mother of the defendant, Thomas Pierce?" "I am," Eleanor said. "And you were present at Thanksgiving dinner?" "I was." "Did you record the video we just watched?" "I did," Eleanor said. "I set my phone on the sideboard because I knew what Diane was going to do. I have seen her do it before." "Mr. Sterling stood up. "Objection, speculation." "Overruled," the judge said, leaning forward. "The witness will continue." "Mrs. Pierce," Monica said, "the defense claims that Rachel was treated as a beloved family member, that she was never asked to work, but chose to. Is that true?" Eleanor laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Rachel was the help," Eleanor stated flatly. "Since she was 15 years old, every holiday, every birthday, Diane did not want a daughter. She wanted a servant who did not charge an hourly rate." "Did you witness this?" "For 17 years, Eleanor said. She reached into her purse and pulled out the black notebook. "I wrote it down, every time they made her miss a party to watch Evan's children, every time they made her clean the kitchen while they drank wine, every time Thomas sat there and let it happen." She opened the book. "Thanksgiving, 2018, Eleanor read. "Diane told her friends, and I quote, 'We are saving $3,000 a year on childcare thanks to Tom's kid. She is desperate for approval, so she works for free.' I wrote that down while sitting in the living room listening to Diane brag." A gasp went through the gallery. Diane put her head in her hands. That specific, monetary detail was devastating. It stripped away the family love defense and revealed the cold economic transaction underneath. "And why?" Monica asked softly. "Did you not speak up before Mrs. Pierce?" Eleanor paused. She looked at me. Her eyes were sad, apologetic, and filled with love. Then she looked at Thomas. My father was staring at his hands, his face a mask of misery. He could not look at her. "Because I was a coward," Eleanor said to the courtroom. "I was an old woman who wanted a roof over her head. I traded my granddaughter's dignity for my own comfort. I let them call her crazy to cover up their own cruelty." She turned to the judge. "I sat in that kitchen and I watched Diane strike her," Eleanor said, her voice trembling with emotion but never breaking. "And I watched Rachel leave. And then I watched my son and his wife sit down and eat pumpkin pie as if nothing had happened. They laughed. They drank wine." Eleanor gripped the railing of the witness stand. "I have been silent for too long. Your Honor, I watched them break that girl's heart over and over again. Today, I want to fix it. I want the record to show that Rachel is the only one in this family who is telling the truth. And the rest of us? We are the ones who should be on trial." "No further questions," Monica said. The room was silent. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. The air had shifted. The narrative of the crazy daughter had not just been challenged, it had been incinerated. I looked at the defense table. Evan was staring at the wall, his jaw tight. Brooke looked terrified. Realizing her name was attached to this disaster, Diane was weeping, but it was the weeping of someone who knows they have been caught, not someone who is sorry. "And Thomas?" My father slowly raised his head. He looked at his mother on the stand. Then, He turned his head and looked at me. There was no anger in his eyes. There was only a profound, crushing shame. He saw me. For the first time in 17 years, he actually saw me. He saw the bruises I carried, not on my skin, but on my soul. He saw the daughter he had sacrificed to keep his wife happy. He slumped forward, burying his face in his hands, his posture collapsing like a building whose foundation had finally given way. I took a deep breath. I felt light. I felt clean. The truth was out. The video, the notebook, the grandmother I thought I had lost. They were all out in the open. Monica squeezed my arm under the table. She did not smile, but her grip was triumphant. "We got them," she whispered. I looked at Eleanor, who was stepping down from the stand with the dignity of a queen. "Yes," I whispered back. "We did." The final day of the trial felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a funeral for the people we used to be. The courtroom air was stale, recycled, and thick with the tension of impending judgment. I sat next to Monica Hale, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my fingers were white. Across the aisle, my family sat in a rigid tableau of denial. Diane was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, playing the victim until the very last second. Thomas was staring at the wall, his face the color of old ash. Judge Vance, a woman who had listened to 3 days of testimony with the impassive expression of a sphinx, finally looked up from her notes. She took off her reading glasses and set them down on the mahogany bench. The sound of the plastic hitting the wood echoed like a gavel strike. "I have heard the testimony," Judge Vance began, her voice calm but carrying a weight that made Evans sit up straighter. "I have reviewed the evidence, I have watched the video recording provided by Mrs. Eleanor Pierce, and I have read the social media posts submitted by the plaintiff." She paused, looking directly at the defense table. In cases of family disputes, the court often urges reconciliation. We often see emotions run high and words spoken in haste. However, she continued, and the word hung in the air like a guillotine blade, this is not a simple family dispute. This is a case of systematic, targeted harassment and defamation. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. The defendants, the judge went on, did not merely express a grievance. They utilized public platforms to intentionally destroy the reputation of the plaintiff. They shared private, privileged medical information, specifically, the email from the plaintiff's adolescence, with the express intent of humiliating her and painting her as mentally unstable to discredit her legitimate complaints. Judge Vance picked up a piece of paper. "Mrs. Diane Pierce, you claimed on the stand that your post was a prayer request. The court finds this claim to be disingenuous. The timestamp of your post, the editing of the email to remove context, and the subsequent comments you engaged with demonstrate a clear malice. You sought to weaponize the plaintiff's mental health history against her." Diane let out a small, strangled sob. The judge ignored her. "Furthermore," the judge continued, her eyes hardening, "the video evidence is conclusive. There was physical contact. There was a shove. There was a strike. To then go online and accuse the plaintiff of fabricating this assault is defamation per se. It is a lie told to damage the victim's standing in her community." I felt Monica's leg press against mine under the table. A silent signal. We won. "The argument that family matters should be exempt from legal scrutiny is rejected," Judge Vance declared. "Using social media to punish a family member because they set a boundary, in this case, refusing to be treated as unpaid help, is not a private domestic issue. It is harassment. It is actionable. And in this court, it has consequences." She looked down at her final ruling. "I find in favor of the plaintiff, Rachel Pierce, on all counts." The words rushed through me like warm water. I felt lightheaded. "The defendants are jointly and severally liable," the judge read. "I am awarding the plaintiff compensatory damages in the amount of $40,000 for the reputational harm and emotional distress caused. Furthermore, given the malicious nature of the defamation and the invasion of privacy regarding the medical records, I am awarding punitive damages in the amount of $60,000, $100,000. I heard a gasp from the defense table. It was Evan. He had likely just realized that his inheritance, or at least his parents' liquidity, had just taken a massive hit. Additionally, the judge continued, relentless, the defendants are ordered to pay the plaintiff's legal fees in full. You are also ordered to immediately remove all defamatory posts across all platforms. You will post a public apology, the text of which must be approved by this court, and it will remain pinned to the top of your profiles for a period of no less than 60 days. 60 days? Diane shrieked. It was an involuntary sound, sharp and piercing. One more outburst, Mrs. Pierce, and I will hold you in contempt. Judge Vance warned. She did not raise her voice, but the threat was absolute. Finally, the judge said, looking at me for the first time with something softening in her eyes. I am granting the plaintiff's request for a permanent restraining order. The defendants are prohibited from contacting Rachel Pierce directly or indirectly. They are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of her home or place of employment, and they are prohibited from mentioning her name, or referring to her by implication, on any public forum in a disparaging manner. It was over. It was actually over. Diane had her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. Evan was red-faced, whispering furiously to their lawyer, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. But Thomas sat in silence. He did not move. He did not look at his wife. He did not look at his son. He was staring at the empty space in front of him, looking like a man who had woken up in a house that had already burned down around him. For the first time, the Facebook words he had allowed his wife to type had turned into real, tangible ruin. Mr. Sterling, the defense lawyer, stood up to make a motion, presumably to ask for a stay of judgment or to argue about the apology. But Monica Hale stood up faster. Your Honor, Monica said, her voice ringing clear in the stunned courtroom. Before we adjourn, there is one final matter regarding the witness, Mrs. Eleanor Pierce. The judge frowned slightly. Is this relevant to the judgment, Ms. Hale? It is relevant to the character of the witness, which the defense attempted to impugn during cross-examination, Monica said smoothly. The defense argued that Mrs. Pierce was senile, confused, and perhaps coerced by the plaintiff. To refute this permanently, and to ensure the court record reflects her competence and independent intent, Mrs. Pierce has asked me to submit a document she had notarized this morning. Monica walked to the bench and handed a folder to the judge, then walked a copy over to the defense table. Mr. Sterling took it. He opened it. He read the first page. I watched his face. I saw his eyebrows shoot up. I saw him lean over and whisper to Thomas. Thomas blinked, confused. He took the document from his lawyer. I watched my father read his mother's new will. I saw the exact moment the words registered. His eyes widened. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. The color that had drained from his face earlier did not return. Instead, he turned a shade of gray that looked sickly. What is it? Diane whispered loudly, lifting her head from her hands. Thomas, what is it? It is a testamentary will, Monica announced to the room, turning to look at the gallery where a few curious reporters were sitting. Mrs. Eleanor Pierce has revoked all previous wills. She has removed Thomas Pierce and Evan Pierce as beneficiaries. A pin could have dropped in that room and sounded like a cannon. The entirety of her estate, Monica continued, her voice devoid of pity, including her investment accounts and the family property in upstate Washington that she holds sole title to, is bequeathed to her granddaughter, Rachel Pierce. You can't do that, Evan shouted, jumping to his feet. That is Dad's money. That is our money. Sit down, the bailiff barked. It is her money, Monica corrected coldly, and she has included a specific clause explaining her reasoning, which she asked me to read into the record so there would be no ambiguity about her mental state. Monica looked at the paper in her hand. I, Eleanor Pierce, make this decision in sound mind and body. I am leaving my legacy to Rachel because she is the only person in this family who dared to tell the truth. I will not fund the comfort of people who abuse my granddaughter, If they wanted my loyalty, they should have shown her some. Thomas looked as if he had been struck by lightning. He turned slowly to look at his mother, who was sitting in the front row of the gallery. Eleanor Pierce did not shrink away. She gripped her cane and met her son's gaze. She looked small, but in that moment, she was the tallest person in the room. The financial loss of the lawsuit, the $100,000, was painful. But this was catastrophic. The upstate property was worth nearly $1 million. It was the nest egg Thomas had been counting on for his retirement. It was the inheritance Evan had already mentally spent. And it was gone, transferred in a single stroke of a pen to the daughter they had tried to erase. "Mom," Thomas whispered across the silent courtroom. It was a plea. It was the sound of a child realizing he has been cut off. Eleanor stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate. She walked to the railing that separated the gallery from the court floor. "You are shocked, Thomas?" Eleanor asked. Her voice was not loud, but in the acoustics of the courtroom, it carried to every corner. Thomas just stared at her, his mouth working uselessly. "You sat there and let them call me crazy," Eleanor said. "You sat there and let them call your daughter a liar. You thought because I was old, I was helpless. You thought because Rachel was quiet, she was weak." She looked at Diane, who was staring at her with a mixture of hatred and terror. "You beat her over a pie," Eleanor said. She shook her head, a gesture of profound disappointment. "A pumpkin pie. You threw away a family for a dessert." She turned her gaze back to Thomas. "You forgot, Thomas," she said softly. "You forgot that a pie can be rebaked. If you burn the crust, you make another one. But trust? When you burn trust, son, it turns to ash, and ash cannot be saved." She turned away from him. She looked at me. A small smile touched her lips, a smile of pride, of conspiracy, of love. "Come along, Rachel," she said. "I believe we have a victory dinner to attend. I am buying." The judge banged her gavel. "Court is adjourned." I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my spirit felt like it was soaring. I gathered my purse. I gathered the black notebook that Eleanor had given me, the evidence that had saved my life. I walked past the defense table. I did not look at Evan, who was slumped in his chair, defeated. I did not look at Diane, who was sobbing into her husband's shoulder, her tears finally real now that they were costing her money. But I paused for 1 second next to Thomas. He looked up at me. His eyes were red. He looked old. He looked like a man who had realized, too late, that he had bet on the wrong horse. "Rachel," he croaked. "Rachel, please." I looked at him. I waited for anger to flare up, but it wasn't there. The anger was gone, left behind on the courtroom floor along with his dignity. All I felt was a distant, cool pity. "Goodbye, Thomas," I said. I didn't call him Dad. I didn't call him Father. I called him by his name, because that is what he was to me now. A man I used to know, a stranger who owed me $100,000. I turned and walked down the aisle. Pushing open the heavy wooden doors of the courthouse, I stepped out into the afternoon light. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking, revealing patches of pale, winter-blue sky. The air tasted cold and clean. It tasted like freedom. For 15 years, Thanksgiving had been a cage. It had been a day of servitude, of silence, of swallowing my voice along with dry turkey. But today, standing on the courthouse steps with my lawyer on one side and my grandmother on the other, I realized that the calendar didn't matter. This was my Thanksgiving. I had given thanks for the truth. I had feasted on justice, and I had carved the rot out of my life with the precision of a surgeon. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sharp, cold air. I looked at Eleanor. She winked at me. "So," she said, tapping her cane on the concrete, "I heard there is a bakery downtown that makes a very controversial walnut pie. Shall we go critique it?" I laughed. It was a real laugh, loud and unburdened. "Yes," I said. "Let's go." I took her arm, and we walked down the steps together, leaving the Pierce family behind us in the shadows of the courthouse. while we stepped into the light of the rest of our lives. 3 hours after the gavel fell, sealing the fate of the Pierce family, I found myself sitting in a vinyl booth at a 24-hour diner called the Golden Spoon. It was not the sort of place where one usually celebrated a six-figure legal victory. The table was sticky, the air smelled of fryer grease and old coffee, and the fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing buzz. But to me it was a palace. Across from me sat Monica Hale, who had traded her formidable blazer for a comfortable cardigan she had pulled from her car, and Grandma Eleanor, who was currently inspecting a laminated menu with the same intensity she had used to dismantle her son's defense in court. "I believe," Eleanor announced, closing the menu with a snap, "that I will have the turkey dinner special, with extra gravy." I stared at her. "Grandma, are you sure? After everything?" "It is just a bird." "Rachel," she said, her eyes twinkling, "we cannot let Diane ruin an entire species of poultry for us just because she does not know how to behave in a kitchen. Besides, I intend to enjoy a meal where I do not have to compliment the chef out of fear." I laughed. It was a sound that bubbled up from my chest, free and unconstrained. "Okay, turkey for 3, then." When the waitress brought the plates, thick slices of roasted turkey, mounds of instant mashed potatoes, and neon green peas, it was the best meal I had ever seen. There were no linen napkins. There was no crystal glassware. There was no tension so thick it made the air hard to breathe. There was just food, and the 2 women who had helped me reclaim my life. My phone, sitting on the edge of the table, had been buzzing incessantly for the last hour. The news of the verdict had leaked. The headline, "Thanksgiving Pie Assault Leads to Massive Defamation Payout," was trending on local news sites. I could see the notifications stacking up. Strangers were commenting. People were debating my choices. Some were calling me a hero. Others were calling me a gold digger. I reached out and turned the phone face down. "You are not going to read them?" Monica asked, dipping a fry into her gravy. "No," I said. "I spent weeks obsessing over what people thought. I spent 15 years trying to curate an image that would make my family love me. I realized today that I do not need strangers to validate me. The judge did that. You did that." I looked at Eleanor. "And you did that." "Damn straight," Monica said, raising her coffee mug. "To the truth, it is expensive, but it is worth it." We ate in a comfortable silence for a while. It was the silence of soldiers after a battle, tired but alive. Then I saw him. Through the large plate glass window of the diner, across the wet street, a figure was standing under the awning of a closed hardware store. He was wearing a trench coat I recognized. He was looking across the street, directly at our booth. It was Thomas. My father stood there in the fading light of the afternoon. He looked hollowed out. The arrogant posture he used to hold when standing next to Diane was gone. He looked like a man who had been stripped of his armor. He took a half step off the curb, as if he wanted to cross the street, as if he wanted to walk through the diner doors, slide into the booth, and say, what? That he was sorry? That he made a mistake? That he wanted his mother back? But he stopped. Maybe he remembered the restraining order that Judge Vance had signed less than 4 hours ago. 500 feet. He was right on the edge of the legal boundary. Or maybe, just maybe. He realized that there was no table for him here anymore. He had chosen his table. He had sat at it for 17 years, watching me serve him, and he had stayed seated when I was struck down. I watched him. I did not feel the urge to run to him. I did not feel the urge to wave him over or to go outside and scream at him. I just felt a quiet, final detachment. He was a character in a book I had finished reading. Thomas lingered for another 10 seconds. Then, he turned up his collar against the wind, turned his back to us, and walked away into the shadows of the city. I let out a long breath. Grandma Eleanor reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was warm. "He made his choice, Rachel," she said softly, "and you made yours." "It still feels strange," I admitted. "To be legally severed from them, to know that I do not have a father or a brother anymore. You have family, Eleanor said firmly. From next year onward, if you want to celebrate Thanksgiving, we will do it wherever you feel safe. We can go to the mountains. We can go to a beach. We can stay in your apartment and order pizza. Or we can ignore the day entirely. She squeezed my hand. Family is not always the people who carry the same name as you. My dear, family are the people who respect your boundaries. Family are the people who stand up when you fall, not the ones who tell you to clean up the mess. I looked at her, and then at Monica, who gave me a sharp, supportive nod. I am done trying to save the old family, I said, the words tasting like a vow. I tried for so long to fix them, to be good enough to make them love me, but you cannot fix people who do not think they are broken. I only want to build a new family now, with people who actually see me. Amen to that, Monica said. My phone buzzed again, but this time it was a single, short vibration, a text message. I glanced at it, expecting another hate message from a random internet user, but the name on the screen made me pause. Brooke. My sister-in-law. The woman who had stood by while I cleaned her children's messes. The woman who had been too afraid of Diane to speak up. I opened the message. Rachel, I know I'm not supposed to contact you, and I know I do not deserve a reply, but the kids were asking why you are not coming back. Leo asked if you were in timeout. I didn't know what to say at first, but then I told them the truth. I told them that hitting people is wrong, even if it is about a pie. And I told them that Auntie Rachel had to go away to teach us that we were not being nice, Leo cried. But he understood. Thank you for showing me that I need to do better for them. I am sorry it took this much pain for me to see it. I stared at the screen. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a reconciliation. But it was a crack in the cycle. Brooke, in her own passive way, had finally seen the toxicity for what it was. She was teaching the next generation that abuse was not normal. I typed a reply. My thumbs moved steadily. Tell them that adults have to learn manners too, and teach them to be better than the way your husband's parents taught him. Break the cycle. Brooke, for their sake. I hit send, then I blocked the number. I wasn't opening a door. I was just leaving a light on for the children, in case they ever needed to find their way out in the future. That night, back in my apartment, the city was quiet. The storm had passed, leaving the air crisp and cold. I went into my kitchen. It was small, but it was mine. I took out a bag of walnuts. I took out the maple syrup. I took out the ginger and the nutmeg. I was going to bake. For the first time in my life, I wasn't baking to impress anyone. I wasn't baking to prove my worth. I wasn't baking a peace offering to be placed on a hostile table. I made the crust the way I liked it. Thick with crushed walnuts, crunchy and dark. I mixed the filling with heavy cream and real maple, tasting it with my finger and adding more spice because I liked spice. The smell filled the apartment. It didn't smell like anxiety. It smelled like autumn. It smelled like victory. When the pie came out of the oven, it was a deep, bronzed amber. The crust was rugged and imperfect, not the uniform, machine-made look Diane prized. It was beautiful. I cut 2 large slices and carried them out to the small balcony where Eleanor was sitting, wrapped in a blanket, looking out at the city lights. Is it ready? She asked, turning to me. It is, I said, the controversial walnut pie. I handed her a plate. She took a forkful. She chewed slowly, her eyes closing. I waited, not with fear, but with anticipation. Well? I asked. She opened her eyes. She looked at the pie, then at me. It is not traditional, she said, a smile playing on her lips. It is not sweet enough for a child. It is nutty. It is complex. And the crust is hard enough to hold its shape. She took another bite. It is perfect, she said. The words settled in my chest, warm and glowing, perfect, not because it followed a recipe, but because it was real, because it was mine. I leaned against the railing, eating my slice of pie. Below me, the cars moved like rivers of light on the highway. Somewhere out there, in a big suburban house, the lights were probably off, Diane was probably crying about the money. Thomas was probably staring at the ceiling, wondering where it all went wrong. But here, on this balcony, there was peace. I thought about next Thanksgiving. Maybe we would go to Italy. Maybe we would volunteer at a shelter. Maybe we would just sit here and eat walnut pie until we were full. The choice was mine. I looked down at the city, feeling the cold wind on my face, and for the first time, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me, not for the family I was born into, but for the courage it took to leave them. I had been beaten over a pie, I had been sued, I had been humiliated, but as the sweetness of the maple syrup hit my tongue, I realized I would do it all again, because walking away from that table was the first time I had ever truly fed myself. The hunger was gone, and I was finally, truly free. Thank you so much for listening to my story until the very end. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please comment below with your city or country so we can connect. If you enjoyed this journey of justice, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button so more people can hear this story and find the courage to set their own boundaries.